And good evening, and welcome once again to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And tonight we are going to be doing part two of a segment in which I will be discussing the Nolan Batman trilogy. Now, in last Thursday's segment, we talked about Batman Begins. And tonight we are going to talk about what I personally consider to be the greatest comic book movie ever made, The Dark Knight, the second part of Nolan's Batman trilogy. And next week, probably not around this time because I will probably be getting, well, the running time is supposed to be about 2 hours and 45 minutes, so I'll probably be getting out of The Dark Knight Rises in about 15 minutes from now, in exactly 1 week. I'm dying. So, but let's actually begin, let's actually move forward, I should say, by talking about Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Now, so first, let's talk about the script. Now, the script writers changed from the first film. We no longer had David Goyer and his script work on The Dark Knight. We had David Goyer doing the story and probably doing some assistance on the script, but the script is primarily credited to Christopher and his brother Jonathan Nolan. And interestingly enough, just I think a little bit of piece of trivia here, that Jonathan and Christopher, although brothers, are one of them was brought up in the United States, and the other one, and that's Jonathan, and Christopher was brought up in the UK. So when you hear Jonathan Nolan speak, for instance, if he's talking about either this film or his work on Inception, or his current TV series that he co-created with J.J. Abrams, Person of Interest, which is a really good show, by the way. He has an American accent. You think, wait, this is Chris Nolan's brother? Yes, it is. So anyway, basically what they set out to do with this film was to make a modern-day crime thriller. Somewhat, but not quite noirish in atmosphere, but more of, basically, as they discuss at the very end of the first film, which is arguably my favorite scene of Batman Begins, which is where you have the conversation between Batman and Commissioner Gordon on the roof when the bat signal is there. They discuss escalation, and that's essentially where this film goes, because as he says, he has this villain that he's about to interact with has a taste for the theatrical, and leaves a calling card, and of course it's a Joker card. And then, of course, my favorite actual exchange of the film being, "I never said thank you," from Commissioner Gordon, then Batman replying, "And you'll never have to." That, to me, is very much the quintessence of the relationship between Jim Gordon and between Batman. I'm sorry, he wasn't Commissioner Gordon, of course, in that film. So we have basically the film starting out with this very elaborate heist sequence in which you have all these people dressed, wearing clown masks and so on and so forth. They break into what ultimately turns out to be a mob bank and steal millions upon millions of dollars from the vault. A lot of people talk about this scene very much reflecting the film Heat, Michael Mann's film from 1995, which is one of the great films of the 90s, certainly one of the great crime thrillers of all time. De Niro, Pacino, Val Kilmer, and the cast list goes on. And I think, interestingly enough, and I would like to ask Christopher Nolan this question, because we have, as the quote-unquote bank manager, we have actor William Fichtner, who has been seen in a number of films and also in television shows as well. And he actually plays a role in a small role in the film Heat. And to see him in that bank in this kind of very, if you've seen Heat, then you kind of know what I'm talking about when they actually do the bank heist. Of course, this ends up a lot differently. We hear, of course, the description of the Joker from the people who are talking about him during this heist, that he wears, that he paints his face. So it's not, this is definitely Christopher Nolan's version of the Joker. This is not, this is not any version that's come before. Bill Finger, Bob Kane's work together, or anything, even when Alan Moore did what is, again, arguably the quintessential work on the Joker. A case could also be made for Ed Brubaker's The Man That Laughs, but Alan Moore and Brian Bolland's The Killing Joke. So obviously this is a film that does take the source material seriously, but actually even more seriously than having someone who fell into a vat of acid, or a vat of chemicals, excuse me, and it bleached his skin, and gave him green hair and everything like that. This is somebody who actually takes on that persona because it's his idea. It's his idea to spread fear, to make even the criminals afraid of him, and also to basically kind of set himself up as being something of a lunatic. Now, in this film, we're also introduced to Harvey Dent. And we see him, he is very much being touted as the White Knight of Gotham City. He's the new district attorney since the previous district attorney was killed in the first Batman film. And so this is actually our third representation of Harvey Dent in the Batman cinematic universe. First, of course, being Billy D. Williams in the first Burton Batman film. The second being Tommy Lee Jones in Schumacher's Batman Forever. And now we have we have Aaron Eckhart playing him in this film. Is a much stronger actor from that standpoint to take. It's a much stronger characterization of Harvey Dent, because for the most part throughout this film we do see Harvey Dent, and ultimately only at kind of the end of the second act do we start to see Two-Face. And there's even mentions of, because when Dent first came to Gotham City, he was a Gotham City cop. He worked for Internal Affairs, and they called him Harvey Two-Face. And that's mentioned earlier in the film when he's meeting with Gordon. Gordon is now head of the Major Crimes Unit. Batman, he's become less of an urban myth. He's made criminals afraid to actually conduct their business at night. The bat signal is almost constantly on, and so you have, his very presence has shaken up and changed everything to its core as far as the criminal underworld in Gotham City, particularly the larger criminal underworld, larger elements, I should say. And that's represented kind of most specifically by Salvatore Maroni, who is kind of, he was kind of the underboss of Carmine Falcone's, of his syndicate, if you will. And since Falcone has become essentially insane, he is now the boss. and Dent is trying like hell to get a conviction. Of course, we have Rachel Dawes returning, this time in the guise of Maggie Gyllenhaal. So again, as we originally talked about casting in the first film, one of my problems with Batman Begins was in the casting of Katie Holmes as Rachel Dawes. Now, according to her, she said that she didn't reprise the role because she wanted to do some other film. This was a film called Mad Money with like Queen Latifah or something like that, and it made nothing. So I think that was ultimately, it was a choice, kind of like Megan Fox being ousted of the Transformers franchise. That, okay, well, this is just not a particularly talented actress. So they dipped more into the indie well, as they did in the first film, much more so. And so, I mean, getting, actors like Aaron Eckhart and Maggie Gyllenhaal, who basically made a name for themselves in smaller independent films. And, of course, that kind of rounding out this cast. And we see Nestor Carbonelli as the mayor. Most of you remember him from Lost, the guy who always looks like he has mascara on, but doesn't really. Yeah, so, of course, just getting into one of the, again, another common criticism of this film, as much as it was in the first film, and even more so in this film, were complaints about Christian Bale's voice. Is that it was harsher, more gruff. It was almost harder to understand. And that, to me, makes more sense, because we're looking now at someone who has been out there for a year, since it's been only 1 year since these two films have taken place, even though it's been a 3-year time span, of course, as far as being released in 2008 and Batman Begins being released in 2005. So we have the rise of essentially kind of a cleaner but more what's the word I'm looking for? A more outwardly cleaner police force, a more outwardly cleaner, Gotham City. And then we have the rise of this massive threat to everybody. And that, of course, is personified in the Joker, who is presented here as not merely a crazed, eternally smiling, homicidal lunatic, but as someone who probably is, psychopathic, or at the very least sociopathic. But he's more of an anarchist, if you will. He's about spreading chaos and fear on a much more grand scale than even what let me rephrase that. It's on a more specific scale, not necessarily on a grander scale than what Ra's al Ghul was attempting to do to Gotham City in Batman Begins, but ultimately it was to make not only the police afraid of him, but the other criminals afraid of him. And that is displayed perfectly in his first real scene, in which he intrudes on the group therapy session, the meeting of all of the criminals, in which he displays a magic trick. This, of course, is a brilliant introduction to his character, and he goes about, basically, the way that I see the Joker is I see someone who is more than willing to die to prove his point. And his point ultimately is that everyone is just one push away from becoming a madman, from becoming a lunatic. And this is obviously largely in part to the astounding script that was written by the Nolan brothers. But more than anything, the Joker in this film can be summed up in 2 words. Heath fucking Ledger. Now, there's been a war amongst the comic book movie fanboy community about whose representation of the Joker on film, on real person film, is better. Jack Nicholson or Heath Ledger. Now, Jack Nicholson admittedly has more of a persona that the Joker has in the comic books. Because yes, he is crazy. He has bleached white skin and green and somehow strangely dyed hair, and he was dropped into a vat of chemicals. So that part at least stayed true to a certain degree of how the Joker becomes the Joker. But this, obviously, taking more of an anarchic approach to the character, Ledger creates something that is far more frightening. Is basically, what would a Joker be like in the real world? This is someone who has purposefully, we think, scarred his face so that it is kind of an eternal smile. And that's, again, this is, also based on the strength of the monologues that the Joker has, in which he keeps telling the story about how he got these scars, how it keeps changing. And that's very much a testament to, like I said, to both Ledger's performance and to the script, and how they actually really went back to The Killing Joke. And because the kind of framework of what's being laid out here is much more expansive than anything in The Killing Joke, but it ultimately boils down to the same kind of idea. Is that, first of all, because one of the things that the Joker says in The Killing Joke is that he prefers to have a multiple choice memory. So even what we're reading on that page maybe isn't necessarily how exactly the Joker became the Joker. And in this film, also, they don't make the mistake of giving him a real identity. He's not Jack Napier. We don't ever see him before. And again, that was even a mistake that I thought Batman Mask of the Phantasm made, was that they made him as somebody who did exist and could possibly be identified. The fact that the Joker cannot be identified is one of his greatest strengths as a villain, because he's very much like a boogeyman, if you will. He is someone that will strike terror into the hearts of everybody around him. Even the people that work for him are afraid of him, and afraid of what he will do. And that's very much in line with the character in the comic, and that was brought to the screen very effectively in The Dark Knight. So this film, really at its core, is about the Joker's ability, ultimately, to give one person one extraordinarily bad day, and they've basically lost their minds. And that is how we have. I'm not going to spoil anything that you haven't already seen. So if you have never seen this film, you should stop watching right the fuck now. But ultimately, with the death of Rachel Dawes, and with the idea that Batman knowing that in order to stop the Joker, he may have to become what he is fought against. As at one point he says he sees what he would have to become in order to stop him. But that's after the death of Rachel Dawes, and that is ultimately because she ultimately would choose, even though obviously there's love in her heart, romantic love for Bruce Wayne, there is a stronger bond that she forms with Harvey Dent. And so and obviously Harvey feels perhaps even more strongly about Rachel than perhaps even Bruce does. Or maybe it's just because, Bruce has kind of forced himself to unattach himself from her quite so closely in order to do what he needs to do. And once, so we have that we have the climax of the film, which is the scene with the boat. And this is also a source of some contention as well. A lot of kind of fanboy generated hate about this film. So it's, basically we've taken a superhero story and turned it into a bit of a morality play. And that it becomes about people making individual choices, but also people who are choosing either to be evil or to be good. And ultimately, even in and of itself, that murder is a choice. And that's a scene, so, that's a decision so brilliantly illustrated with the Joker's plan of separating Rachel and Harvey, ultimately as revealed in the scene in the interrogation room. See, ultimately, this film is so successful, not because of any one thing. Everything in this film combines to make a perfect film-going experience. That is a very rare thing, to get something that you can't really nitpick about, or that you can't say, I didn't like this part, but I liked these other parts, or I didn't like these two parts here, I liked this part here, and that was it. To me, this is, like I said, it's a perfect movie-going experience, because it's incredibly smart, it's unbelievably well-directed. I mean, Christopher Nolan, did obviously a great job with the previous films that he had done, but everything that came after that, as far as the ability to construct a scene is concerned, I mean, from films like The Prestige, which is an absolutely brilliant film in and of itself, that was really kind of the beginning. That was almost a prelude to what we ultimately see in The Dark Knight. I like, another part of the film that I like is the title, is that it doesn't say Batman The Dark Knight, it just is called The Dark Knight, because we know who The Dark Knight is, obviously. But, it didn't need to give itself a subtitle, it doesn't call itself Batman 2 or anything like that. I mean, these films, the titling of them has been very smart all the way through. So that, so like I said, we have touches of The Killing Joke in here, but more this is, Nolan's, his expression of his universe, of Nolan's Batverse, if you will, that, again, is more based in reality. We have, more definitive evidence now that, okay, well, Lucius Fox obviously knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman and is willing to do whatever he can to help him. The construction of the new suit is also better, because, again, it's not quite so stiff. He can turn his head, so the organics of actually the suit changing from one thing to another it makes sense. I mean, it's, just from the opening scene where we first see Batman, we have the Batman imitators as well. So I mean, this is showing the escalation of not only what the Batman has done to inspire good people. Obviously, these are people that are very willing to take the lives of criminals. They are your standard vigilantes, but it also inspires the criminals to embrace someone that is so far away from thinking in a criminal element that he just wants to cause, like Alfred says, some men just want to watch the world burn. And that's exactly what they've done here. So, I mean, but, I mean, as far as, as I was saying, with Nolan's direction, I mean, from the opening scene with the bank, then to, just the opening scene with Batman and the Scarecrow returning, that he's the only name in town as far as drugs are concerned, but he's lacing his drugs with his fear toxin. So we have that really cool little kind of cameo by Cillian Murphy once again. Then once it gets to the centerpiece of the film, which of course is the delivery of Dent to the lockup after he claims that he's Batman. And, so we have, just from the very beginning, we have this moment where we see that something is very wrong, and of course it fits completely and totally with the Joker's very sick sense of humor, is that we see what's blocking the street is a fire truck on fire. Now, a great deal of this film was filmed in my hometown of Chicago, so it was beautiful to see some of that, because particularly the confrontation once, so we have the Batmobile, the Batmobile Tumbler chase scene, then that, converting into the Bat Pod, and we see all, and that whole thing, and of course, that does, of course, defy some belief, but it works, in an order where you don't really have to suspend it that much. Because you could see that this is something that the Batman feels would be necessary in case of catastrophic damage to the Tumbler. So, building that as an escape pod, if you will, is a perfect solution. Again, the performances throughout the film, particularly by the supporting cast of Aaron Eckhart, also very much of Gary Oldman, his own performance in this, very unsung, because he does a brilliant job of being torn between, what his responsibility is and what his own personal hopes and his own personal stake in everything is. Because again, the police turn against the Batman because it just there's this desire to save Harvey Dent because of everything that he's already gone through. So let's take a moment and also talk about, because this is something that was not it's not something that was very talked about on the Blu-ray, and even because watching all the special features and everything like that, there isn't really a lot of discussion about the makeup or CG that was used for creating Two-Face's look, for creating Harvey Dent's Two-Face look, because it's absolutely frightening. It really is terrifying. It's very surprising how this film really toes the line of being an R-rated film, it's right there. It's right on the cusp. Aside from not having any language, really extreme blood or violence, and not having any nudity, certainly, but having this very pervasive, dark current throughout the entire film, from almost start to finish, but it does allow itself moments of levity. Even the Joker himself is funny. You know, the fact that he calls himself the Joker is not so much a jab at how funny he is or that he's a jokester, but the fact that he views life itself as a joke. And, you know, so this is someone who is suicidal, really. He wants, well, not so much suicidal, but in the sense that he wants to die in order to in order to show everybody what they're capable of becoming. He wants Batman to kill him because he knows that Batman will not kill. You know, he wants, you know, when he's standing there with the Bat-Pod, you know, about to run into him, and he's just standing there waiting for him, begging the Batman to hit him. And when Batman, ultimately in the final confrontation between them, throws him over the side only to catch him with the grappler, he wants that death. He wants to die knowing that the Batman broke his rule. And the film is so heavily layered that you can't doubt for a second its intelligence and how smart of a film it is. But it's also so exciting in watching the development of the characters and how they act and then react to events that happen within the film that makes it so entertaining. The cleverness of the dialogue, it drops a lot of kind of the more jokey moments. It drops a lot of kind of the summer film moments from its list. This is a film that easily could have been released around the holidays and probably gotten the Best Picture nomination that it was due. And then ultimately, it's obviously even still talk that this film actually inspired the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences to institute the program in which 10 films can now be nominated for Best Picture, even though last year was only, even though 2011 was only 9. But that's a story for another time. And then of course you have the performance of Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger was someone that I didn't really start following his career, like most of you, until A Knight's Tale, which is actually a really, really good film. It's incredibly fun. I enjoy it a lot. I think it's very, very well made. And then seeing him in other films over the years, a film like The Order, which is a very, very underrated film, and unfortunately very underseen film. But then once we started to see him in films like Monsters Ball, in which he had a very small but very, very powerful supporting role, and then, of course, his role as Ennis Del Mar in Brokeback Mountain. And again, it was, the whole kind of backlash against the casting of Heath Ledger as the Joker, and how, people just really, it's going to be Batback Mountain. What are we casting, a gay? That was, a gay Joker. That was, all the talk up until we started seeing the previews for the film, and people said, okay, Heath Ledger can actually do this. Hopefully. And then when we saw the film, I don't know, any of you out there who are watching this, I don't know if you saw Heath Ledger in any frame of that film, because I sure as fuck didn't. I saw the Joker through and through and through. Even if you had taken off the makeup, which he did for one scene, of course, the honor guard scene, we have, he completely metamorphosizes into the Joker. Now, of course, we do have to talk about the legacy of this film as well, because it obviously stirred a lot of controversy during its release, because this was, you know, at the tail end of the Bush administration. You know, so that, you know, the solution that Batman uses to find the Joker seems to be, you know, people were kind of calling that a, you know, almost in defense of the Patriot Act, and how, you know, he was using eavesdropping and torture throughout the film as a means of extracting information about the Joker, and ultimately to find his, you know, and ultimately to find his location. So, of course, we know this to be bullshit. That was never intended. That was just what some people saw in this film. They saw it, at, like I said, as a defense of the Patriot Act. Now, of course, the other thing that needs to be talked about is that, of course, the death of Heath Ledger. It was, other than Brandon Lee, who, you know, of course, tragically died during, you know, in the last, 9 days of shooting of The Crow, his is the only other real celebrity death that I've felt on a personal level. I remember actually sitting in my psychiatrist's office, waiting for an appointment, and the news broke on one of the cable news channels that was on. I think it was CNN, and the news broke that Heath Ledger had been found dead. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation since then that that even just the role of the Joker led to his accidental overdose, because, you know, apparently he had been having trouble sleeping. You know, and just kind of dealing with things on a day-to-day basis after his work was done in The Dark Knight. I think that is absolutely not the case. I think to even really regard that as the truth is disrespectful to his memory. And we lost one of the most talented actors, certainly of this generation, when he died. It was a very tragic day, but I was very proud to see that Heath, proud and obviously very saddened as well to see Heath's performance winning the Best Supporting Actor Oscar that year. So it was very, you know, a lot of people will say that, well, the reason that, you know, this film was so successful, it was the third, until this summer, it was the third most successful film of all time. It broke records all over the place. And, you know, of course, actually at the time, it was the second most successful film of all time until Avatar came around the next summer. So, you know, but now in third place, of course, we have the Avengers. And, you know, while the Avengers is the greatest comic book movie ever, or greatest superhero film ever made, I will still stand by the fact that, at least for right now, The Dark Knight is the greatest comic book film ever made. Like, the fact that it's a Batman film is obviously very specific, but it also is an ancillary benefit. Because if we had just gotten, you know, a cop playing, you know, a cop against a character like the Joker, we would have gotten a brilliant film. What ultimately is why I say this is the best film of the last decade is that there are only really a few films that you can sit through again and again and again and again and again and never get tired of it. That's what makes a film perfect. That's what makes a film great. And if it's on TV, you cannot change the channel. Even if it's on just regular commercial TV, if that film is on, I can't turn it off. Because it's just another chance for me to just revel in this film's greatness. Everybody is great. Every performance is superb. Every relationship in the film, everything feels organic. None of this feels like it's something that was just written. It feels natural. And I also am skimming over an important part here, which is, of course, the final scene with Harvey Dent and the Gordon family and with Batman. Did Batman kill Harvey Dent? Is there a way that he could have subdued or stopped Harvey without pushing him, off of a ledge? Because Batman doesn't kill. And did he kill in this film? Again, that is a subject of some debate. Absolutely not, in my opinion. It was fast, decisive action that needed to be made. But I don't think in anybody's wildest dreams that Batman meant to kill Harvey Dent. Is he responsible for his death? Probably. But did he kill him? No. There is a difference. So, while, which is ultimately, I think, not just the only reason, other than not letting the Joker win, that he decides to take the rap for Harvey's killings. But also just important is that he needs to take responsibility for his own actions. He made a choice to stop Harvey from killing Gordon's son. And that's what this film is about. This film is about consequences and escalation. So again, Batman murderer? No. Is it the same thing as being responsible for a death? No. But ultimately he is. And that's an important distinction to make when considering this film. So, as far as this conversation is concerned, I think I've said pretty much all I can say. I mean, I could literally sit here, watch the film, and give you a commentary track. I literally could do that. Absolutely no problem. But I'm not going to go quite that far. We're going to probably end up being 45 minutes here, so I'm just going to say, again, thank you for watching. This has obviously been something that's been rolling around in my head for quite some time. I also did kind of change the lighting. As you can see, those of you who are new here, of course, welcome. Please feel free to subscribe. Please feel free to comment. Please feel free to like, to dislike, to agree, disagree. Don't troll. That's all I ask. Don't troll. Don't be an asshole and troll. And say, Ledger's sucked, and all that kind of bullshit that I've seen all over YouTube. Because to do that, you're just making a fucking ass of yourself. So just don't do it. Don't be a dick. Okay? But feel free to comment. Please be respectful. That's all I ask. And, of course, if you liked what you've seen, if you liked this, please subscribe. I will probably be putting up the playlist of my previous reviews also up on this video as well, at least for the this channel's Shadow Gallery the previous review for Batman Begins from last week, and also from the alternate Shadow Gallery page, in which you will have my summations of the previous 4 Batman live-action theatrical releases. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, this is James Donnelly from the Shadow Gallery, reminding you to stay in the shadows.